Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. The scramble for Antarctica is well and truly underway. Even though Antarctica is planet Earth's only continent that has no native population, there are already several claimants for Antarctica's territory and its resources. And this week, China unveiled its latest research center on Antarctica. Called the Qinling, the crucifix-shaped Chinese structure will be staffed year-round with quarters sufficient to house as many as about 80 people in the summer months. But the location of the new Chinese base on the Antarctic continent has sparked some immediate concerns. Qinling is expected to include an observatory with a satellite ground station, and this means that the new Chinese research base can collect signals intelligence from the US-aligned Australia and New Zealand, especially the rocket telemetry data from Australia's recently constructed Arnhem Space Centre. But China has rubbished these claims.
As a consultative party to the Antarctic Treaty, China has always conducted its activities in accordance with the relevant provisions of the Antarctic Treaty system. The construction of the Chinese Antarctic Station is fully in line with international rules and procedures on Antarctica and will be conducive to enhancing scientific knowledge of Antarctica among mankind, providing a platform for cooperation between China and other countries in Antarctic scientific research, and promoting peace and sustainable development in Antarctica.
The Antarctic Treaty that was signed in 1959 by 56 nations and that came into effect in 1961 has defined Antarctica as all the land and the ice shelves south of the 60° south latitude. The treaty recognized Antarctica as a scientific preserve. There is freedom for scientific investigation, but military activities are banned, while the use or testing of nuclear weapons in Antarctica is absolutely prohibited. There can be naval activities in the Southern Ocean so long as they happen on the high seas. A total of 7 nations, including the likes of Argentina, Australia, Chile, France, New Zealand, Norway and the United Kingdom, lay claim to the territory on Antarctica. But these are territorial claims that are not recognized by the United States and many other nations around the world. There are also overlaps in the territories that have been claimed by Argentina, Chile and the United Kingdom. If you look at this map closely, what will strike you is that even those nations that are not in the vicinity of the Antarctic have territorial claims over the continent. Global warming and the rapidly melting ice has brought to the forefront the enormous untapped resources of the Antarctic continent. According to the Australian Civil Military Centre, the Antarctic continent has an estimated 500 billion tonnes of oil. Over 300 to 500 billion tonnes of natural gas reserves are expected to be found on the Antarctic continent, while another 125 billion tonnes of oil is expected to be found in the Southern Ocean. The frozen continent is also estimated to have deposits of coal, diamonds and gold. And apart from this, Antarctica also has 2/3 of the world's fresh water, which many experts say is actually its most valuable resource. So the scale of the resources that are available on Antarctica is setting off a scramble for the colonization of the last remaining untouched continent on planet Earth. Rafah is in the southern part of the Gaza Strip along the border with Egypt. An estimated 1.3 million Palestinians whose homes have been destroyed in the Israeli offensive in the war so far are now living in makeshift tents. Senior aid officials have warned that a full-scale Israeli offensive on Rafah will result in a bloodbath. Jan Egeland, the Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, has said that no war should be allowed on a gigantic refugee camp. At this moment as we speak, nearly half of all of Gaza's population has sought refuge in makeshift tents in Rafah and its adjoining areas. Even the American President Joe Biden, who's been a stout backer of the Israeli offensive in Gaza, has now described the Israeli military offensive as over the top. So what really is the situation in the Gaza Strip at this moment? And what objective does Israel seek to accomplish with its ground offensive on Rafah? Our next report gets more details. This is Rafah. And in the last 4 months, a whole new tent city of people who've been expelled from their homes due to the devastating Israeli offensive has sprung up. The conditions here are very dire. In the bitter cold of the winter, there is hardly anything to eat. There is very little water and no sanitation.
This thing has to be taken seriously.
But what is not stopped are the Israeli airstrikes. Neighborhood after neighborhood in Rafah has been bombed to rubble. Members of the Al-Mashuka family were sleeping in the night when an Israeli bomb struck their home. 5 members of a single family were killed in just one airstrike. And the surviving family members are inconsolable.
We were sleeping and we suddenly woke up to the sound of bombing. Rocks were above our heads and a fire had started. At the end, I was calling for my mother, father and my siblings and they did not answer me. When I woke up, I could not find anyone in the house except my sister. We kept looking for anyone else in the house, but we did not find anyone other than my little sister. I tried waking her up, but she was at the edge of the wall. We kept trying to wake her up, but she would not wake up. Now she is in the Al-Nizar hospital. My father and mother were martyred, and also my little brother. He was 3 years old, my only brother. He was only 3 years old.
In another part of Rafah, Palestinian families who were forced to flee from the north have now been forced to live in chicken sheds. Metal frames of the cages are now being used as beds for children. The place is humid and cold.
We used to live in our homes. Our children used to sleep on beds. They were warm. Even though our living situation was not great, but there was family warmth. We were a complete family. We had warmth. We had smile on our children's faces. And now, at the worst situation, the chicken cages have turned into beds for our children. It is cold. Our psychological state is bad. The children's mental well-being is destroyed. Imagine a child sleeping in a chicken crate.
But the Palestinians in Rafah are bracing themselves for the worst. Netanyahu has vowed to carry out a ground offensive into Rafah to topple the Hamas brigades, which Israel now claims have taken refuge in Gaza's southernmost city. But any ground assault will result in devastating toll on the civilians in Rafah. Even the staunchest ally of Israel, the United States, does not appear to be on board with Netanyahu's plan for a ground offensive on Rafah.
I'm of the view, as you know, that the conduct of the response in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, has been over the top. I think that, as you know, initially the president of Mexico, Sisi, did not want to open up the gate to allow humanitarian material to get in. I talked to him. I convinced him to open the gate. I talked to Bibi to open the gate on the Israeli side. I've been pushing really hard to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. There are a lot of innocent people who are starving, a lot of innocent people who are in trouble and dying, and it's got to stop, number one.
In the northern part of the Gaza Strip, the conditions of the Palestinians is way worse. Almost little to no humanitarian aid is trickling into northern Gaza. At the Jabalia refugee camp, the Palestinian families who have vowed that they would not be expelled from their homes again and be turned into refugees have stayed put in even the most inhospitable of conditions. An estimated 300,000 Palestinians still live in northern Gaza, even though almost the whole of northern Gaza has been flattened and reduced to rubble in this Israeli war on Hamas.
I don't know what to tell you. It's a hopeless situation. Instead of getting some rest, we dig under the rubble. This water line, for your information, we dug it out from under the rubble. We kept digging until we found water. I don't know what else to say. We are back to the Stone Age, 30, 40, 50,000 years ago. We dig water out, filter it from sand and use it for cooking.
On a day when Turkey was commemorating the anniversary of an earthquake in its south that killed more than 53,000 people last year, at least one person was killed and 5 others were wounded in a terror attack in front of Istanbul's central courthouse. The 2 assailants, a man and a woman, were killed in the gun battle with the security officials. They are believed to be associated with a leftist terror organization that has staged attacks in Turkey since the 1980s. Now, Turkey is gradually emerging from a decade-long violent spell marked by repeated bombings and other attacks linked to jihadist fighters and Kurdish militants. This attack that targeted a police checkpoint near a courthouse shattered that sense of security, rendering the nation vulnerable. Our next report gets more details.
The Çağlayan Courthouse, also known as the Istanbul Justice Palace, is a huge court complex on the city's European side. Heavily guarded and with multiple entrances, it had the distinction of being Europe's largest courthouse at the time of its unveiling in 2011. Istanbul's main courthouse turned into the site of a terror attack at 11:46 a.m. local time on Tuesday. 2 assailants, named only as EY and PB, fired on a police checkpoint, injuring 6 people, 3 of whom were police officers. One of the wounded women later succumbed to her injuries. Responding quickly, the Turkish police shot dead the 2 assailants.
I had some business at the courthouse, so that's why I was here. I finished what I had to do and was going toward the exit. Just as I walked out, I heard gunshots and a gunfight broke out. I saw the 2 terrorists with my own eyes. One was a woman and the other was a man, and they were in a gunfight with police. The man was shot first. The woman was shot too after she fired a few rounds.
The 2 attackers are believed to be members of the Revolutionary People's Liberation Party Front, or DHKPC, which is a fringe terrorist group largely inactive in recent years. Reportedly, the attackers had previously served jail terms for terror-related offences. Interestingly, half an hour after the attack, the elder sister of the female attacker appeared in the courthouse as a defendant, facing charges of membership in a terrorist organisation and possession of dangerous materials. Condemning the attack, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan pledged to continue the fight against terrorism.
2 terrorists, 1 woman and the other a man, were neutralized by our police officers before they could achieve their vile goals. Turkey will continue its fight against all terrorist organizations and their supporters with determination, without any discrimination. I ask God for a speedy recovery to our wounded. In the meantime, I wish for God's mercy on one of our injured who passed away.
A far-left group, DHKPC, is considered a terrorist organization by Turkey, the United States and the European Union. The group had claimed responsibility for a February 2013 suicide bomb attack on the US Embassy in Ankara, in which a Turkish security guard was killed and 4 others were wounded. And in 2015, at the same courthouse attacked on Tuesday, the DHKPC group had taken a prosecutor hostage. They had demanded details about the police killing of a teenager during anti-government protests the previous year. When the police stormed the building, 2 gunmen were killed and the prosecutor also later died of his injuries. Is the fringe extremist organization, which has lied dormant for a few years recently, making a comeback? And more importantly, how prepared is Ankara to deal with this new security challenge?
The Democratic Republic of Congo, that was formerly known as Zaire, is Africa's second largest nation. The Central African nation, that is rich in valuable mineral resources, has been plagued by myriad armed groups in its east that are fighting for control. Preeminent among these is M23, a largely Tutsi rebel group that is linked to neighboring Rwanda, although Kigali has denied these charges. Now, in a fresh advance, the M23 rebels have surrounded the strategic town of Sake, forcing thousands to flee to the North Kivu's capital, Goma. The Congolese army and the United Nations peacekeepers have so far struggled to contain the M23's advance. Our next report gets you more details.
Democratic Republic of Congo ranks among the 5 poorest nations in the world. Compounding the problem for the impoverished nation is the insurgency in its east, which it has been battling for decades. More than 120 rebel groups are fighting with national armed forces for power, land, and valuable mineral resources. Prominent among them, the M23 rebels launched a major new offensive in March 2022, which led to a military intervention and mediation efforts by the East African regional leaders. A ceasefire was brokered last year, but it has been violated repeatedly. As the fighting between the Congolese army and the M23 rebels intensified over the last week, thousands of people on foot, on motorbikes, or in cars moved from the towns and villages around Goma to take refuge in the city. Sake, a strategic point on the road to the provincial capital, Goma, has emerged as a flashpoint in the latest fighting.
People are dying like flies. Some are getting crushed on the road as they flee. Look at the number of people arriving here in Mugunga. All those who were in Sake are here. Now we find ourselves in the middle of the fighting. Sake is about to fall. What are we going to do now? Is the lake all that's left as a place of refuge? It's the end of us now.
Goma, which is the biggest town in the area, has a large Congolese army presence. About 5 hours away from Sake on foot, Goma itself has not been spared by this war. M23 rebels had overran the North Kivu province in 2021, albeit briefly. Recently also, at least 2 rockets landed in the city's outlying districts, though no casualties were reported. United Nations describes the situation as very worrying and alarming.
As you know, the situation on the ground is very worrying and alarming. It raises the risk of a regional explosion, or at any rate of a very strong intensification, with a regional characteristic or an increased regional component, with the involvement of different countries in the region to a greater extent.
The Congolese president, who was re-elected in December, has struggled to bring an end to the cycle of violence despite his promises. If the town of Sake falls to the rebels, it would be a logistical blow to the Congolese army. With the situation around Goma fluid, the city of approximately 2 million people remains on edge.
Once considered a bastion of peace in Latin America, Ecuador has been plunged into crisis in the last 5 years after unchecked mushrooming influence of transnational narco gangs, who use its ports to ship cocaine to the United States and Europe. The newly elected president, Daniel Noboa, has declared a war on these narco gangs. In a major morale-boosting success on the 6th of February, the police in Ecuador and Spain carried out a joint operation which led to the seizure of almost about 2.4 tons of cocaine and also the arrest of 30 of these narco criminals. More importantly, the operation also led to the dismantling of a drug trafficking organization led by an Albanian. Our next report gets you more details.
In what is now being considered a milestone in the collaboration between different countries in the fight against organized crime, 57 raids were carried out simultaneously on Tuesday in 6 provinces of Ecuador and in 4 Spanish cities related to alleged money laundering and drug trafficking. Tuesday's operation was the result of 2.5 years of investigations and the exchange of intelligence between the police of these 2 countries.
In this mega operation, we have had arrests of citizens of Ecuadorian, Colombian, Argentine, Spanish, Albanian and Chinese nationality. We have carried out several raids in Ecuador, 40 raids in Goiás, El Oro, Santa Elena, Cotopaxi, Pichincha and Azue, and at the same time in Spain, in the cities of Barcelona, Malaga, Marbella and Valencia. Also, we have arrested 30 people, 18 in Ecuador, 12 in Spain, and we have seized real estate.
Reportedly, cartel members had entered Ecuador by posing as businessmen who operated through 6 companies in Ecuador and 4 in Spain. Authorities are of the opinion that the mastermind behind the drug trafficking organization is an Albanian named Dritan Gjika, who had placed orders to cocaine-producing laboratories in Colombia. Gjika, who owns 13 companies and has no prior criminal record in Albania, was not among the 30 arrested on Tuesday.
In this major operation, we have discovered a structure, an organization dedicated to shipping drugs transnationally. This organization was dedicated to the trafficking of illicit substances, for which they use the ports of our country to reach their destinations in Europe, to the countries of Spain, Belgium, the Netherlands and Turkey. And later this drug was distributed in Europe.
The success of the operation, which is now being hailed as a milestone in the fight against organized crime, dismantled not only the drug trafficking structure, but also the money laundering structure of the organization. Given the large number of troops involved in 2 different countries on 2 continents, who had to be coordinated on the same day and at the same time, the success of this operation is a shining example of a template to fight the scourge of narco gangs.
And with that's the wrap on this edition of World at War. And if you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.